morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, both here in person and online. I am very pleased to welcome you to the second seminar of the day. It is a continuation of the wonderful seminar that just wrapped. In this second seminar, we want to think about where action happens. Cities can play an essential role through resilience building to prepare and manage for natural disasters. Or as the previous panel said, it can help us have a new concept of development which is more resilient. Cities are the heart of our countries. They are where most people live and where most of the GDP is produced. But this high concentration of goods and people makes them extremely vulnerable to shocks. Shocks like, for example, increase of intensity and frequency of precipitation. This is the case of Recife, where we will hear about floods, or the droughts in Quito from last year. The cities are also highly vulnerable to hurricanes and their impacts. We will hear from Acapulco's experience and what they did after Otis and John hurricanes. In addition to being highly vulnerable, effects in cities are highly asymmetrical, and those that live in informal settlements, where 20% of families in the region live, and where resilience interventions, both at the citywide and the localized level, are extremely urgent. Well, people that live there are highly vulnerable. Conditions can be based on geography, people who live on hillsides, but there's also vulnerability based on a lack of planning or low quality or inadequate infrastructure. Political commitment, financing, technology, and genuine partnerships between the private and public sectors are essential to address the challenges that we face. To discuss this, I've given you a brief intro already, but we have invited an outstanding group of experts. We will hear first a keynote and then a panel, and then we will have a Q&A session. And you can send suggestions for these questions using the QR code. So to open the session, I would like to begin by inviting Adriana Lobo to the stage. She is the Managing Director of Global Presence and National Action for the WRI. And she will discuss the challenges, but above all, the opportunities that the region has to strengthen their climate resilience. Adriana, thank you very much. Welcome.
Buenos días a todos, a todas. Muchísimas.
Good morning, everyone. I thank the IDB for this invitation. We will be speaking in all three languages. The presentation is in English. I will make it in Spanish, but we will be discussing how we can use nature-based solutions to build resilient cities. I studied engineering for many years, and back then we didn't see nature as part of the solution, but we are increasingly studying how this can be part of the solution. So cities are facing an increased set of problems that come from climate change. This is a picture from Porto Alegre, where the entire state of Rio Grande do Sul was underwater for almost a month. Floods with 176,000 people who were affected, 206 people who died. Most of economic activity in the state was affected. And $15.5 billion were lost. It actually had an impact in national GDP for Brazil. So Nature is a great, powerful tool. We haven't always thought this way. I think that the Amazon basin for Brazil is the greatest tool that we have in the world. 90% of agriculture in Brazil is reliant on rain. Imagine we had to build infrastructure to replace what that natural irrigation infrastructure does for the country. What type of solutions are we discussing when we think of a city and when we think about nature? First, protection of wetlands and forests, high river basins, and when water falls, nature can absorb all that water upstream. And what happens is nature self-regulates, it's absorbed, and it can flow down at a slower rate. River management, grasslands, wetlands that are natural pools, urban parks, practical improvements in agricultural lands. And in coastlands, mangroves and wetlands are very important. They substantially slow hurricanes. Cities that see natural phenomena that lead to loss of mangroves have higher impacts from hurricanes. There's also reefs. We also see permeable pavements in cities. So nature is a great system to regulate rain and water flows, but it regulates something that has become increasingly important, which is the regulation of the flow of heat. Typically, nature helps us with water a bit. It also significantly helps us manage heat. And we see impacts in cities. We see differences in temperatures within the city between 3 and 8 degrees, depending on the type of pavement. And with increases in temperature, we've seen very intense heat waves. And cities have seen an increasing number of deaths as a result of these heat waves. These are challenges in our cities, and they mainly have impacts on our most vulnerable population. A single natural disaster has the potential to return many thousands of people to poverty. So, if nature is such a great solution, why aren't we meeting our objectives? We have 3 main obstacles. These are the ones that we've identified. First is political will and public policy, and the other is technical capacity. Truth be told, we don't have the capacity to harness these solutions, so there's much left to develop yet. We also have finance. These solutions are long-standing, but return timelines are also too long. So with the IDB, we mapped nature-based solutions for Latin America and the Caribbean, and we've seen solutions. We've seen how this has been used in 4 sectors: water sanitation, housing and urban development, transportation, and energy. On the water and sanitation side, our objective is water supply and quality. 96% of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean have access to water, but not necessarily at the levels of quality or in the quantities required. We should invest $14 billion a year to ensure equal access to clean water in Latin America. And of that, if we are able to improve conditions with nature-based solutions, we could save up to $890 million in water treatment, 7-8% of the cost of water use. So the issue of wastewater treatment, nature has filters. We only have 30 or 40% that is treated in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Agua de lluvia, en que 44 millones.
Finally, rain management. 40 million people are exposed to floods in a regular fashion. That number continues to increase. Finally, for housing and urban development, what types of things can we use as prevention for landslide? to stave off floods, but also to mitigate their impacts. Some years ago in Monterrey, there was a rainfall, a hurricane hit the city, and with speed of water, it destroyed all streets in a very important urban area of the city. And the highland of the mountains around the city have been deforested to reforest those higher levels of the mountain. Mountain is the most effective solution that can be applied to control the speed with which water hits the city. Wave levels as control is important to protection of reef, protection against storms, stormproofing, and protection against sediments. We conducted a study in the Bogota River watershed. Well, there's a couple of things: a larger water source with a chingasa, and a second source of water that can't be used because agricultural sediments are highly relevant. So what can we do with forestry and livestock management techniques and reforestation? We can address this, and these are investments to the tune of $5.3 million, and that would lead to savings in electrical energy used to clean water, and that would lead to better results. So tell you about an initiative that we have, Cities for Forests. Many of the cities represented here participate, and through this initiative we're seeking to attack the three main challenges: political action engagement, technical assistance, and the financial dimension. In political action, it's very important to ensure that this is placed on the political agenda, so investments can be unblocked, and to ensure that as we develop policy, that we understand that non-traditional actions are also relevant. We have a meeting here of mayors in Brazil. There was also a study conducted for the new economy in the Brazilian Amazon basin, where they seek solutions around the creation of local economies where at the same time you rescue and protect nature. Finally, in terms of technical assistance, there's a lot of work. There's something that is very relevant here, which is to identify climate action plans. And we have an important initiative in terms of comprehensive climate action plans, where we seek to look at mitigation and adaptation measures, and at the same time have the right priorities for the most relevant actions. If you look at this, there's a high level of citizen participation, and we observe that when there's high participation by communities in these plans, they always have long-lasting and relevant results to reduce levels of impact. Here we have another map of Brazil. In Brazil, as you can see, we've acted in a number of cities. We have a particular example. It's moving at a very funny rate. We have an accelerator for the city of Maranguape, where we were able to unblock $9 million to address a significant flooding problem that the city was facing. And if you look at this, we were able to apply a number of solutions on the riverbanks to have precipitation gardens, biofiltration gardens, evaporation areas, and other green solutions that led to very interesting results in terms of reducing flooding in the city. There are other opportunities that have come from working along the river with resources from municipalities and cities. In terms of green financing, truth is, well, these are solutions that are unknown. They are not familiar to financial institutions, so there's work to do to build business cases for green and gray infrastructure to help explain the advantages, where the highest socioeconomic benefits are, and what the return timelines are for these investments. And with that, we've worked in a number of cities. We worked in Jalapa and Mexico to have a voluntary supplement rate of 2% so that people that live along the river can invest in reforestation activities so that riverbank can be resilient to floods and protect the city from it. And finally, integrated climate action in Colombia that seeks to create integrated economic action plans in cities in Colombia and to work thusly to have a well-ordered action plan with a series of predictable investments over time. We believe that these solutions are indeed what we will see more of in the future. We have some assessments. They're always very conservative, but the co-benefits of these investments are significant because when we invest resources in maintaining these green areas for local populations, we're also creating livelihoods for populations that are exposed to these risks. If you would like to reach out, I work for the World Resources Institute, WRI. We have a number of initiatives to develop technical capacity.
Adriana, for an outstanding presentation. You have provided a very good starting point for this panel. There are many things I'd like to cover. I'm not sure we'll be able to do that, but we'll give it a try. I'd like to talk about planning. Also, infrastructure, both green and gray, especially in informal settlements. I think we should also speak about data and technology. And lastly, I hope we can speak about financing as well. To kick off, I would like to begin with Avelina. Avelina, cities like Acapulco have worked on disaster prevention and mitigation plans, and you've done this using land management and planning tools that could be extremely useful. What I'd like to know is, in Acapulco's reconstruction plan, or what have you used in the context of that plan, and how can multi-level coordination contribute to the process? First, let me say thank you for this opportunity, participating in this forum on behalf of the people of Acapulco and the city of Guerrero. We have seen tough times, 2 hurricanes, and in 2023, because of that, we set up a program for ecologic land management, which will ensure that concrete will not be used for future building. We need to look at the wetlands. We need to see what can and cannot be built on those sites. And we also have the municipal development plan, which, as a result of those 2 hurricanes, has been updated. The regulations have been updated as well. We had not experienced a Category 5 hurricane in the past, and this made us make changes. Glass has to be hurricane resistant in these areas. Another regulation, which is a useful tool. We lost 2 million trees with Otis. So the tool we have is now a reforestation program. And it is one of the instruments we use in urban planning and development initiatives in the city of Acapulco. We are a tourist destination. It's our only industry. But this compels us to revisit the tools we have for development and also environmentally friendly initiatives, which we need because of climate change. We need to continue to make efforts so that we can be more resilient and so that our city can continue to develop and so that we can move into the future. Thank you, Avelina. Maximiliano, now I'd like to turn to you and ask you to speak about the national landscape in Chile. You have a subnational resilience planning initiative, and you work very closely with municipalities and regions in developing their resiliency plans. Could you elaborate on this? Tell us how it started, how it developed, and what the results have been, what challenges you've encountered as well. First of all, I'd like to say good morning to everyone and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this outstanding panel and speak about this very important topic regarding planning and climate action. Our country, it's compelled to action by the current circumstances. There are many things happening in our countries. 6 of the 9 climate vulnerability conditions are present, and our citizens are seeing this. We have large-scale fires, which we did not see in the past, also heat waves, storms. And this means that we need to plan on the mitigation side as well as adaptation and resilience. These become more urgent. We began in 2022 with a framework law which sets the overarching objective, which is to be carbon neutral by 2050 as well as climate resilient. This law also establishes sector planning tools. We have sector plans for adaptation and mitigation. They were approved last year. It also stresses what happens at the subnational scale, what each region must do and which comuna have to do. We have 76 municipalities which must also have regional and commune action plans. So the emphasis is on implementation and action. It's essential because the impact of the climate crisis has an impact on the territories, and it is important to have actions that are pertinent and that are developed jointly. So there has to be planning at the sector, regional, and then local level. The municipalities must also have their own action plans that are part of this planning structure. And they must focus on their situation at the local level. This is essential. It's also been a challenge. We have 346 municipalities, and they're very different. They face different hazards and challenges, and they also have different levels of capacity. Some have had action plans for years now, whereas others do not and face special challenges, especially those that are in rural areas. We've developed guidelines with them, also training sessions for their personnel, working with the Ministry of the Environment. And we have seen that several of them have developed their own initiatives like ordinances for fire prevention, restoration of wetlands, community projects. So they are engaged, and it is something that we must continue to do together. Something else we have identified as a challenge and opportunity, because we believe that it's important to enhance resilience. If we do that at the regional level, we are able to protect our citizens, number one. We also reduce the risk for investments, and we also start to see new opportunities for local economic development, for innovation, and this is the result of planning and the implementation of measures that are suited to local realities. This brings new opportunities, which we think are significant, and that is another thing we are working on. Thank you very much, Maximiliano. Now I'd like to go from planning to action and how cities, using their infrastructure and enhancing, and how they can enhance resilience in some areas. I'd like to ask João, you have 200,000 people living in informal settlements and in highly vulnerable situations. After the rain which affected Recife in 2022, your government launched a risk reduction program, which also includes access to infrastructure. And I've been told that it's been highly successful. So what I'd like to ask you, if you could please share with us the main pillars of this program and also the preliminary results you have achieved.
Primeiro, uma alegria.
First, it's great to be here today. Recife is in the northeast of Brazil. It's a city with 1.5 million inhabitants in Pernambuco. I am the mayor of Recife, and I have the responsibility of overseeing the city. We had 846 millimeters of rain in a few days. This is much more intense than you will see in other cities of the world over a year. And Recife had already been developing projects for areas that are vulnerable to precipitation and landslides, and we were able to accelerate raising of international resources, and we had a program of $360 million to make investments in the city with the IDB. So we have good projects and to have the ability to raise funds, investment makes all the difference. Today we have three pillars of investment within the program. First is for integrated urbanization, to be able to urbanize the most vulnerable areas. That includes sewage, drainage systems, the channeling of streets, urbanization of communities with the methodology of public participation. The second pillar is resilient infrastructure. Here we have two major actions. Recife has 40% of its territory in flat areas that are cut through by rivers and channels, more than 99 of them. And the rest is hills. So that pillar of infrastructure has to do with macro draining and the protection of the riverbanks and coastline. So we are talking about expected outcome after the 5-year period of 50% of draining to the Rio Pio, and we will be able to protect more than 12,000 people in risk areas by protecting the coast. All this based on the premise that we are trying to build a resilient city with these projects, and with the ability to translate projects from paper into action and to reach the most vulnerable areas thereby. Understanding that the people that live in risk areas in the city are close to rivers that have a risk of flooding, and there are people who live in areas of risk of landslide. Recife is one of the cities in Brazil that is more vulnerable to climate change, mainly based on an increase of sea levels. It's among the 20 most vulnerable cities in the world, based on a UN index. We know that what results need to be reached. Mainly, we need to build capacity. That's the stage that we're on, to be able to translate the projects from paper and to ensure that those investments reach the households that come to the door of the people that need them the most, which are the most vulnerable communities. The IDB was essential for that. There was an operation of the Inter-American Development Bank with our city. It's already been completed, and the main results are being observed already. We can already see that families are being protected, communities are being urbanized, and that has always included the main pillar of public participation. All the projects undertaken, listening to people with their participation. There's no point in coming to these communities and implementing top-down solutions. It's essential for each community to participate, and they can improve and direct what's happening and what will be built in their communities and homes. Thank you.
Now I'd like to come back to Adriana and ask you about informal settlements. Chile is also affected by the socio and nature events that affect informal settlements. And you are making great efforts to achieve cross-cutting actions and have national programs also embed resilience initiatives through different means by priority setting or targeting. So I'd like to know if you could please share with our audience some of the details of the work you're doing. I'd like to go back to what I said earlier. The new framework law calls for sector plans on climate action. It's an essential component. The Ministry of the Environment cannot take on all the challenges related to climate action by itself. It involves resilient infrastructure, also public works, also nature-based solutions. So this is a huge effort. We need to work on introducing changes, cultural changes, and organizational changes. It also involves the Ministry of Housing to look into how it's possible to improve the way we build homes and also cities. So the sector plans for mitigation and adaptation were in themselves a challenge, especially because in recent years, as a result of the pandemic, we have seen more migration, which has increased the informal settlements surrounding our cities. So these are an area where there are many risks, especially risks of fires in these settlements. These are areas where it's not always possible to plan ahead. Informal settlements bring new challenges to the scene, in addition to those that are brought on by nature. So that is why we have emphasized the importance of working with the municipalities as part of the sector approach. It is a challenge we are grappling with, but as I said, it is important to not just plan at the central level. And that's a challenge because our country is highly centralized. Now, for the first time, we have regional governors, and that is new, which brings an entire series of additional challenges with it. But it's part of decentralization efforts that are underway. We need to make sure that the measures that are introduced are suitable for the local conditions. Abelina, Acapulco is not immune to natural disasters and their impact. I'm thinking of Otis in 2023 or John in 2024. You are currently working on a plan to rebuild Acapulco. Could you tell us what the fundamental pillars of this plan are? How do you work with vulnerable populations, and how can you ensure that the rebuilding efforts will make Acapulco more resilient than it was in the past? First of all, let me say that Acapulco is a city which has a population of 852,000, and to rebuild the city, well, as I said before, we are a city that relies on tourism. So what have we done? The city was devastated. We lost more than 13,000 lampposts. We had no water, no electricity. The hotel infrastructure, restaurants, more than 300,000 homes were destroyed. Their roofs caved in. So the federal government came in first. President López Obrador allocated more than 350 million pesos, and that made it possible for us to work during the first 3 months during the crisis to start to bring the city back. So right after that hurricane, we had Hurricane Yon, and we were hit from both directions. We had more than 1,000 liters of water per second when we were still in crisis. With the arrival of President Claudia Sheinbaum, we developed a plan. It is an integrated plan for the coastal part of the city. And then there's another plan for transforming Acapulco. We can't only focus on hotels and tourism destinations. We have other areas of the city that also need to be addressed so that we can rebuild the city. So Acapulco has about 280 hotels. Otis left these hotels unable to operate, and this meant that we had to put things in motion. And as I said, with the assistance of the federal government, we're able to cover the first stage. And then with Acapulco Se Transforma Contigo, with this other plan, we focused on the other plans that are also part of Acapulco, that were also hit hard, that also have their own issues. So the purpose of the plan is to find ways to invest sizable resources in water management initiatives. We have 3 sources of water for the city. But we had also had issues in the past, age-old problems. So what the hurricane did was simply emphasize the issues we had in the past. With the investments, we're going to be able to develop wells that will provide water to 50% of our population. We'll be investing in wastewater treatment plants. We have 21 plants. The hurricane destroyed them all. So now we are starting to rebuild them. We also have 79 rivers, 79 dams, and right now we are still carrying out cleanup operations in order to reduce our vulnerability during the rainy season. It's not easy to experience 2 hurricanes in just 1 year's time. We had to deal with a major crisis, but we need to move forward. There's no other choice. In this comprehensive plan, Acapulco Se Transforma Contigo, it's not just about tourism. we also have to look at the rural areas. We have 129 communities who make a living from their crops. They plant corn and Jamaica flower. We also have mango and coconut, but people who work in the fields, 15% of that population works in the field. So Acapulco is by nature vulnerability to climate change, given our geographic situation as well. But it is a beautiful city. And even though we do need to work on early warning systems, that is part of how we address climate change. We need to focus on prevention, and we need to be able to offset the impact of these natural events. So I am here. I draw strength from the people who elected me, from my city. We went through very tough times. We looked like a city that had been bombarded. We had no water, no electricity, no communication. We were completely cut off. But today we are rebuilding. And I'm very pleased to be here to tell you that although it's true that we still have a lot to do, when it comes to adaptation, that will be the next step for us. As was said, we need to develop instruments. We can no longer work on development without considering nature-based solutions and resilience. There's a long road ahead. We're also vulnerable to earthquakes, hurricanes. We have no choice. So as some have said, we also need to talk about insurance arrangements. We're just beginning to work on that. But this forum, I would say, is a first step for us. It enables us to find instruments we need in order to boost our efforts on the prevention side. Federico, I'd like to ask you about technology. Technology can be instrumental when it comes to managing a response in the event of an extreme natural disaster. Your company, Oxymom, is an expert in building of weather stations. What would you recommend to our cities? What technology-based solutions should they consider? Well, first of all, good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to simply correct, the name is Omixon. When we speak of an extreme event affecting a city, we're really looking at the end of a story. We believe that it's important to focus on where the story begins. And that beginning means understanding these physical phenomena and see how they impact cities and the city dwellers. And the only way this can be done is by looking at how they live and measuring. To measure, you need to install equipment, you have to measure rainfall, temperature, and other elements. But also something that was mentioned before, it is important to have proper maintenance plans that make it possible to keep the equipment working on a regular basis. When states have to make decisions in this area, they do it when the story is just beginning, and at that time, they don't yet know what the impact of an extreme event are going to be. So these needs compete with other urgent needs cities face. But the more data we have, the longer our time series, the more useful the data will be, and the more useful they will be for cities. We use measurement in order to understand the phenomena. We and be in a better position to manage them. Also, with universities, we use data and generate knowledge that is based on them. And this is important for planning purposes. Planning means designing. They're synonymous. We look at what needs to be done to address each of the problems that are part of the overall issue, that is connecting the cities and exposing them to nature. Then we have to look at the how, and this is where financing and the IDB come in. When does this work need to be done? Then also we look at the end of the story, once the cities are hit by an extreme event, and that brings in the need to have early warning systems. This was mentioned before. And we need to have civil defense groups and firefighters and other emergency or first responders use the data. We did this in an IDB lab initiative in Córdoba. The more we measure, the more data we have, the better planning, the better we'll be able to plan, and we'll be able to reduce the vulnerability of our cities. These events can happen very quickly and yet cause major damage, floods, fires, and there are others that are also environmental, but they're more silent, and they may threaten the health of cities, or of people who live in cities, like air pollution. We also need to measure those so that we know what is in the air we breathe, particulates, for example. So these are not as virulent, but they're also significant.
Del nombre. Yo quería volver.
Sorry for misstating the name of your organization. Joao, I wanted to go back to you. We heard about the value of green infrastructure to strengthen our cities. Recife has placed a major bet on the expansion of green areas, on the introduction of green-blue infrastructure. I wanted to ask how this green infrastructure is strengthening urban resilience, and number two, have you faced any challenges in implementation? That's a very important point for the future of cities. It's the construction of a city park, as we call Recife. We need a long-term plan to expand park areas of the city to strengthen mobility, make sure that the city is walkable, to ensure that cities are built and developed with people at the center of all decisions. For that, use a Brazilian expression. When you have a fabric that is made of smaller patchwork of fabric, you need to have a long-term plan, 30, 50 years, and to ensure that every piece of fabric that is smaller is aligned to that longer-term plan. So we need to have a master plan that looks at particular area, an execution plan that has green areas, but we mainly have to have an investment plan that focuses on these park areas. We built 3 parks over the last 4 years. We have an additional park that is under construction currently, and a new concept that was launched in Recife as the line parks along the riverbeds, and also floodable parks. We're talking about a type of infrastructure that did not exist in the past. When you go to people that live close to the riverbeds, well, we were able to build quality infrastructure, but we also made sure that those public spaces have climate resilience dynamic, not just for entertainment or leisurely activity, but that people also have equipment ready to dampen the impacts of flooding. And at the same time, that keeps floods and rain away from people's houses. Until recently, we discussed climate change like something that would be happening in the future. In the case of Recife and the case of Mexico and Acapulco, this shows that this is not the future. It's in the past, it's in the present. So the time has come to make investments, to have specific projects, to have mechanisms for financing these projects. And cities and countries require structured plans that prioritize knowing what to do and then have the available resources to use in doing what you know needs to be done. You can follow that. We have worked to increase green areas, to increase permeable areas. We have incentives and training programs within schools so people can focus on protecting the environment and cleaning the city. So everything's interconnected. Maximiliano said things that were spot on. He talked about the necessary interconnection between these actions, but the moment has come when cities need to discuss this as a daily task, to have projects, to know what to do, and to have resources to translate that from theory to action. Avelina, perhaps on the same issue in the previous panel, Ruben had mentioned insurance. And from that perspective, the appraisal of nature-based values, reefs, and other nature protective areas, corals and mangroves have great capacity of dissipating wave motor energy that come from storms. In Acapulco, where these nature preservation activities have great value. So what types of activities are you undertaking to conserve these natural goods? We have lost about 8,000 hectares, not necessarily as a result of hurricanes, but as a result of deforestation. And under this comprehensive plan called Acapulco Transforms with You, and thereunder we are providing for the cultivation of mangroves, of wetlands, and with the support of President Sheinbaum, there will be a decree to protect the areas of Coyuca, the Black Lagoon as we call it, to stop further development of these areas would lead to these impacts. There is scientific data that shows that if we had conserved these wetland areas, we would have not felt such an impact from these two hurricanes. So we will have a very dynamic program to reforest this area and others. Hurricane Otis took down more than 2 million trees, and so we will develop a program to plant trees and bring more stability to the Taladero Park. With the support of the federal government, we will be able to work on this program called Acapulco Transforms Itself with You. We have the coastline area. That's the main tourist area. We're very vulnerable. Obviously, the sea temperatures have risen as well. That has brought consequences with it. So Acapulco is already vulnerable to climate change, and we need to work collectively. We need to raise awareness. We need to work with people to ensure that they're not throwing solid waste into ravines or channels or the ocean. We need to ensure that when disasters strike, that the freshwater sources are not polluted. I come to this meeting to humbly learn from everyone's experience, to know what other countries and places have done. We have adapted, but we also need support. In the case of Acapulco, our budget is limited in terms of our ability to face a situation of this magnitude. We saw 2 hurricanes that practically tore us down. But we're also here in this meeting to explore ways in which we can walk hand in hand and help our beautiful city. Federico, we were talking about data, 2 million trees, et cetera, et cetera. So data are essential when it comes to strengthening resilience. You have extensive experience with traditional data and not so traditional data that is more participatory. And I wonder if you could share the value of these types of data with the audience. Today, the stakeholders that engage on these issues are basically governments. Governments make decisions, and companies that contribute the monitoring systems, the universities that take that information and translate it into input so governments can work better, and financing sources. But from the measurement perspective, we identified an area with room for improvement, which was a lack of granularity in the data. Let me give you an example. Rainfall has a great spatial variability. So, in very few hundred kilometers could offer different data points, very different data points. Same with temperature. Given that situation, and given that it's not economically viable to have monitoring or measuring equipment every square kilometer, we need to find a new way to make these measurements. We have developed a concept called citizen-based science. So we want to ensure that citizens who endure the impacts of these disasters, that they participate in climate change measurements or climate measurements. They typically measure with low-cost equipment like pluviometer, the manual, simple tools, and they give us benchmarks. And we've also worked in schools that has a dual effect. First, we educate children so that they can understand the impact that climate has on their everyday life. In some cases, we go to schools where they can't get their daily meals at school because there was a major storm, and that's where we start working. And there's interesting work between teachers and children. So some of those data are collected with a certain level of rigor. We had an automatic weather station that was open source that we developed. It's online now. And what we seek to do with that is that anyone, anywhere in the world can download that measurement equipment, perhaps even improve it, because that is what technical collaboration is about. Under the open source concept, we've also added some features to our platform to ensure that those who collect the data, can download or upload them and share them with the rest of the community. So we want official sources to be complemented with these citizen sources, and the objective is the same: to better understand and model events and understand how they impact cities, to then work on mobility. Joao, a second ago, Abelina mentioned a problem that many cities in the region face, which is budgetary constraints that we are bound by. Recife undertook a fiscal adjustment plan that was transformational, which allowed you to transform your credit situation, but it also allowed you to take or to make the necessary investments to respond to the 2022 rains. Could you share with all the cities that are listening to us what the main pillars of this fiscal adjustment plan were, and on the other hand, what recommendations would you make so that other cities can respond in the same way that you did? The main premise is that in order to make investments to build a resilient solution in a city, that entails a cost, a high cost. It's a high budgetary need. Depends on the reality of each country and city, but in Brazil you have two main pathways. Either you structure a major financing operation long-term to undertake that investment, or you have federal resources from the federal government. In the case of Mexico, you have the federal government that makes contributions to these major works. Recife undertook a fiscal adjustment plan the first year of our administration, so we undertook a series of measures to cut costs and to increase the city's credit rating. In Brazil, to obtain global financing, you need the federal government to underwrite that financing, and then you can obtain those international resources if your credit rating is hiding them. So for the city to have access to IDB resources, as we did, you need to have that endorsement from the National Congress and national government. That is why we undertook a fiscal adjustment first year, cutting spending and increasing our revenue using fiscal intelligence rationale. We didn't increase taxes, but we were able to increase revenue. Tax collection, we established a permanent mechanism to reduce costs. That is why our credit rating went up. And in tandem, it's not enough to just have the resources. You need to know what to do with the money so you can channel it in the best way possible. I typically say, if we compare it to a plane, or the analogy of a plane, you have two engines. You have a structured engine to collect resources and another engine to undertake projects, so that once you have the resources, you can properly spend those resources. So we have those processes in tandem. We wanted to raise $6 million, and we saw rainfall in 2022 in Recife. We were able to optimize those resources. We had already made the adjustments. We already had the credit rating, and we were able to collect 3 times more than what we had planned based on the climate emergency. Why I'm saying that, if we hadn't done our homework a year before, we wouldn't have had the ability to triple the resources that we collected, because we wouldn't have had the necessary credit rating for that. What would I share with mayors? In sum, nothing. And life works if you are out of balance. So in order to take care of people, you need to have a balanced balance sheet. You need to have a fiscal framework which is in order, and you need to have long-term projects. You can't limit your thought to 4 or 5 years. You need to work with a long-term perspective with projects that last 30, 40 years. You need to have a mindset that goes beyond that. That's a state government mindset, not an administration mindset. Thank you. We're starting to hear questions from the audience. The first one is for you, Federico. I wanted to start by asking Omixom, Amixum stemmed from a concept that turned into a startup, and we hope that it ends up being a high impact, high scale company. I wanted to ask you what challenges entrepreneurs face, but I also have a question from Maria Jose Urrutia that I would like to ask you on how public private relations are working in the area of urban resilience.
de los emprendedores. Me parece que
On the question regarding entrepreneurs, there are three things to say. Number one, new professionals already have a climate mindset. In previous generations, we didn't see that as frequently. On the other hand, in the past, this type of water or climate challenges were always covered by the hard sciences. Today, they are still addressed by hard sciences, but they have become much more specialized, and we've had this involvement now of soft sciences, communications, sociology, etc. So we have a multi-sectoral approach, and if all these areas can engage with each other effectively, they will lead to better solutions that are more robust. In connection with entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs are the ones called to push the boundaries. And on Mixum, we decided to not download the data to a computer anymore. We decided to upload them to the cloud. That changed the rationale. People looked at us funny, but today, 15 years later, we can discuss whether they're uploaded to the cloud through X device or X method, but they go to the cloud nevertheless. We started working with an organization that was using surveillance cameras in the city that are along the coastline area so that they can measure the level of rivers through videos. So there's a concept that helps us avoid installing a specific sensor and rather reuses existing infrastructure like these cameras, and that enables an optimized use of resources. So entrepreneurs do address this call to develop better and more things. In terms of private and public sector, I think that ongoing engagement and to ensure that people living in cities are always at the center of our work, to mitigate egos in governments and companies. That's the best path for solutions. Perfect. Maximiliano, I have a question by Tiago Nascimento, who wants to know how cities can articulate vulnerable communities in planning process for resilient infrastructure, thereby avoiding top-down solutions. That is an essential challenge. I mentioned it at the top. In a highly centralized country, the preparation of public policies has been very relevant, and their participation is essential. We, as a country, are part of the Escazú Accord. It's a regional agreement that seeks to promote participatory processes and environmental justice. We have looked at high impact spaces and have paid attention to that and ensuring participation and these areas. So every regulation, plan, initiative that we develop has some layer of public participation, but the emphasis is that public participation, observations, and comments need to be duly addressed, that people know what can be taken up, what cannot. We've also emphasized regional workshops in addition to the participation stage. In some cases, we work subsequently in other areas, but we've also added early participation for preparation, but also in awareness-raising workshops so that the citizenry can be abreast of what we're doing, and we want to ensure that that involvement translates into greater legitimacy for the instruments that we're preparing. And that is something that we have stressed significantly. There are many challenges and difficulties, especially in more remote areas and smaller, medium-scale cities, to be there and be able to work. I mean, we have more technological solutions now, but at the end of the day, citizens always want us to be there in person, to have those discussions face to face. We have been able to reinforce many of these elements, but it is a challenge, especially, as I said, during execution, to ensure that participation processes are not just a part of a checklist. We want to make sure that the citizens understand that what they contributed was taken into consideration. But we also need to be sincere. We need to explain what issues that they raise cannot be addressed because of costs or relevance, etc. But we've emphasized this in the planning stages, and also now in many cases where we are moving to implementation of these plans. Thank you very much, Joao.
Los problemas.
One of the problems cities are facing is going from the concept to action and to project implementation. If you could tell us in just a few words, how did you do it? I would say that the challenge lies in using political will and also having the technical capacity. It's important to also engage the population to bring them on board. In 11 months, we developed a consultation document in record time. We also set up a specific structure in order to proceed with the investments that were required. It was a special office. And also it's important to engage the population in all the stages. We worked with a participatory model so that all projects executed by Promorar would follow a participatory approach throughout. So we worked in addressing or reaching out to communities, to adults, to women, in order to ask them where they felt safe. And then we would go to the field, go to those sites, and try to craft a solution through these social processes. So participation is essential so that you don't have questioning or challenges down the road. It could not work for extreme events, or it's important for the persons leading a project, for the financial institutions to be working on these issues without wasting any time. So that sense of urgency, I think, is key. We need to communicate and we need to harness political will in order to undertake the actions that are needed so that people will be informed and that all of this will be done in a timely manner. Thank you very much, Joao. We have received many, many questions and we will not be able to answer them all. So I'd like to say thank you for all the ideas and suggestions we have received. This brings us to the end of the seminar. I'd like to thank Adriana and also Maximiliano, Joao, Abelina, and Federico for having been with us this morning and for sharing information about their personal experiences. As you know, the IDB is fully committed to supporting the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean to promote inclusive and resilient cities. Thank you to all for being with us in person and online, and we hope to see you soon.